Beyond midnight, no one is truly alone.
Are you going to keep watching?
I always say that darkness isn't just the absence of light, it's an invitation to everything we don't want to see. Today, you're going to join me in the darkest corners of the night shift in the United States. These are confessions from people working the night shift in places where sanity isn't guaranteed. 3 stories: a truck driver on endless highways, a night watchman in a forgotten cemetery, and a prison guard where even the walls whisper. All these voices say the same thing: there's no night shift without ghosts. I want you to watch until the end. Like the video, share your theories in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. Because each story here is more than entertainment. It's a warning that when the clock strikes midnight, no one is truly alone. So, turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and get ready to hear the kind of horror only those who work in the dead of night dare to tell. I've always been a man of the road. Those white lines on the asphalt passing by like the rhythm of my thoughts. Driving for hours without seeing anyone, just my headlights cutting through the void. If you've ever worked the night shift, you know what I'm talking about. But being a truck driver in the United States is a special kind of solitude. Miles of nothing, silence broken only by the engine's rumble. It's easy to get lost in your own mind, and when that happens, sometimes you find things you never wanted to find. I want to tell you what I lived through on one of those nights. Not because I want to remember it, but because I feel like I need to warn anyone who still has the courage to drive those deserted highways after midnight. Don't leave now. Stay with me until the end. Click like to strengthen this dark investigation. Comment if you've ever seen something you can't explain. Subscribe to hear other stories from people who've seen the darkest side of America. I hesitated for a long time before telling it. Who would believe me? A tired, half-drunk, half-asleep trucker seeing things. But what I saw wasn't a dream. It was a warning. It started so subtly that even I doubted it. But in the end, it was brutal. If you're listening to this in the dark, alone, I recommend turning on a light. But I doubt it will help. Because after you hear this story, the road never seems empty again. That night started like any other. The load was urgent and I was already tired before even turning the key. I left Albuquerque heading north, toward Denver. Miles and miles of nothing, just the moon sliced by heavy clouds that seemed to want to swallow the world. On the road, the AM radio crackled. Distant voices, religious sermons mixing with meteorologists warning of a possible storm. But the sky looked calm, at least for now. At one point, I saw something on the shoulder, a figure standing there. I slowed down without thinking. Night drivers help each other, as that's the code. But when I got closer, the figure vanished. There was nothing there anymore. My heart sped up, but I forced a laugh. Just tired, I thought. I checked the rearview mirror out of reflex. Nothing on the road behind me. The only living thing there was me and the pulsing engine. A few miles later, a low fog appeared without explanation. Thin, but it seemed to dance under the headlights as if it had a life of its own. I felt a chill. I had never seen fog on that stretch. Turned on the defroster, adjusted the lights. But that mist kept moving, gathering, breaking apart in strange shapes. That's when I heard a metallic sound in the trailer. 3 knocks, loud enough to make the steering wheel vibrate. I held my breath. I was alone. The load sealed, the lock intact. There was no one back there, but I heard it again. 3 knocks, almost rhythmic. I turned off the radio to be sure. Silence. My heart was beating louder than any noise. That's when I noticed something that froze my blood. The digital odometer was blinking, flickering. A short circuit, I tried to convince myself. But the numbers weren't right. They were spinning backward. I must have been really tired. That's what I told myself. But deep down, I knew something had changed. That road wasn't going to let me reach my destination in one piece. I should have stopped. Seriously, I should have pulled over at the first station or even slept on the shoulder. But truckers are stubborn. And I had a deadline, so I kept going, even with my hands shaking on the wheel. The fog grew denser. The headlights lit up a white tunnel, and I could barely see the center line. Everything looked warped. I slowed down, but there was no shoulder, no signs. It was as if the world had been swallowed by that fog. The GPS went crazy. The arrow spun in circles. The mechanical voice kept repeating, recalculating, until it turned into metallic static. I turned it off, and that's when I smelled it. A sour stench, rotting, like meat left out for days, but it didn't come from outside. It was inside the cab. I lowered the window to clear it, but the stench got worse. I started breathing through my mouth, eyes burning. I looked in the mirror. I saw something in the back seat. For an instant, there was a figure sitting there. I couldn't make out the face, but the outline was clear. Someone was watching me. I nearly ran off the road, swung around quickly, and there was nothing. Just the heavy sound of my own breathing and the truck creaking as I pulled it back onto the asphalt. That's when I noticed the temperature had dropped. Inside the cab, the air was freezing like a freezer, and I heard a whisper, not loud, not clear, but unmistakable. Stop. It wasn't my imagination. The sound came from the passenger side, but the seat was empty. My hands were so slick with sweat I could barely hold the wheel. I didn't know where I was going. There were no signs, no exits. The speedometer was spinning wildly, 30, 90, 10, as if the truck no longer obeyed the laws of physics. I started to pray, something I hadn't done since I was a kid, but as soon as I spoke the first words, I heard laughter, deep, raspy, like something perched on the dashboard, mocking me. The road felt endless. I started crying without realizing it. I didn't want to die there. I didn't want to know what was in that fog, but it was already too late to turn back. I knew I wasn't alone in that cab anymore. The truck felt like it had a will of its own. Every curve was tighter than I remembered. The wheel resisted my hands as if something was pulling it away from me. The fog swallowed everything. No sky, no ground, just a suffocating white corridor. I didn't know if I was in New York or in hell. The noises got worse, knocking in the trailer, like someone trying to get out, hard enough to shake the side mirrors, and that laughter, now louder, more confident. It sounded like it was enjoying my terror. I tried to scream, "Leave me alone," but my voice came out weak, swallowed by the freezing air. I felt something brush my neck like cold fingers. With every jolt, it felt like something was settling in more comfortably inside the cab. The headlights flickered, flashing in intervals, creating dancing shadows in the fog walls. In that strobing nightmare, I saw it more clearly. It wasn't human. Too thin, with limbs bending the wrong way. The face, if you could call it that, was a black slit that widened as I watched. But there were eyes, two glowing red embers staring at me, hungry. It spoke, not with its mouth, but in my head. A deep voice I couldn't silence. "You brought me. You opened the way." I screamed, prayed, slammed the wheel, but nothing changed. The banging in the trailer was frantic now, like dozens of hands trying to break free, like I was carrying a load of monsters I never imagined hauling. The speed became unmanageable, 80, 100, 120 mph in that fog. Curves appeared too late. Tires screeched on wet pavement. I begged for the brakes, but they squealed and failed. The dashboard went dark. Only the engine roared, and that horrible stench that seemed to pour from my own chest. I didn't know if I was breathing or choking on smoke, and that's when I realized I wasn't driving anymore. I was a passenger, and the truck would take me wherever that thing wanted. The horizon vanished. Everything turned to darkness. I didn't know if I was alive or dead, but I could feel every bone vibrating with that laughter, promising I'd never escape. I don't remember exactly when I blacked out. It was like time split in half. 1 second I was screaming, fighting the wheel. The next, absolute silence. No engine, no road. I opened my eyes and saw solid darkness, almost physical. It felt like I was floating in nothing, but I could feel the seatbelt pressing into me. The truck still held me like a metal coffin in a vacuum. That's when I realized the knocking had stopped. A terrible silence filled my ears, and I wasn't alone in the cab anymore. I didn't see it get in. Maybe it had been there from the start. Maybe it had always been there. But now it was right beside me. So close I could feel its icy breath tearing at my skin. I turned slowly. I didn't want to look, but I had no choice. That face, it had no real shape. Just a pale flesh mask with that black slit of a smile widening as I trembled. The red eyes were the only color in that dead world. It didn't speak. It didn't need to. Everything it wanted was clear, pulsing in my chest in rhythm with my terror. It fed on it. I felt its bony hand clamp onto my arm. The pain was real, sharp, freezing. When I tried to pull away, it squeezed harder. I heard my bones creak. I cried, begged, prayed, but prayer meant nothing there. The last thing I remember was feeling the seatbelt crushing me against the seat as that mouth opened wider than should be possible, a bottomless black hole, and it leaned in toward me. I didn't scream. I couldn't. The sound died in my throat as it kissed me with the void. Then nothing. I woke up hours later on the shoulder. Engine off, lights dead. The trailer was sealed, the lock intact. No signs of tampering, but my skin was marked. Bruises on my arms, frostbite burns, and the cab reeked of rotting meat. My phone read 3:33, the same time I had seen on the odometer before passing out. I started the engine and drove away without looking back. I finished the delivery, arrived hours late, shaking, pale. The manager didn't want details, just stamped the papers with contempt, complaining about the delay. I never told him the truth, never told anyone, until now. I switched trucks, changed routes, even thought about quitting. But you know the worst part? It doesn't matter where I drive. Sometimes I see that fog on the horizon. It waits for me. It calls to me. And I can feel that cold presence shifting in the seat next to me, even when it's empty. The doctors said it was stress, insomnia, that I made it up. But tell me, how do you explain the bruises on my arms? The stench that comes back for no reason? The nightmares that always end with those red eyes watching me in the dark? I know it's still there. It let me live to tell this. Maybe to warn other truckers who think they're so tough. If you're driving at night and see that fog dancing in your headlights, don't go in. Detour, stop, run, because something uses those roads as a trap, and it's always hungry. No delivery is worth your soul, and now you know. So if you made it this far, do me a favor. Like this video to keep this confession alive. Comment if you've ever seen something like this. Subscribe so you don't miss the rest of my stories. And if you liked this story, click the link below and discover even deeper horrors in our exclusive ebook. When I took the job as a night watchman at a cemetery in the small town of Greenville, Indiana, I thought it would be easy. They're paying you just to stay awake and walk around, people said. They don't tell you about the silence. A silence so heavy you can hear it pressing on your bones. They don't mention the wind that seems to speak, the statues that watch you even without eyes. At the interview, the caretaker only warned me never to sleep on the shift. He said it dead serious, no smile, like someone who had seen something he wished he could forget. I laughed. Of course, I thought it was just his way of saying, be responsible. But over time, I learned it wasn't advice. It was a warning. I want to tell you this story not because I think you'll believe it, but because I need to tell it. Maybe someone out there, some other poor bastard looking for work, will think twice before taking a job like this. Working at a cemetery at night isn't like any other job. There are rules. Rules you have to follow, even if you don't understand them. On my first night, I was confident. I'd done security work before. I'd faced drunks, thieves, people with guns. But none of that prepared me for what was waiting there. The cemetery was outside of town. A rusted gate, old fences that creaked in the wind, ancient cracked tombstones covered in moss that hid the names, stone angels with broken faces, as if they wanted to cover up what they'd seen. The only building was a tiny guard shack, damp, smelling of mold and burnt coffee. A flickering fluorescent bulb that seemed to mock me. That first night, I did my rounds, smoked 3 cigarettes, stared at my phone the whole time. That's when I noticed the silence there wasn't normal. It wasn't the absence of sound. It was a presence. Something was watching me, something waiting for me to make the smallest mistake. Don't leave now. Stay with me to the end. Like the video, comment if you've ever worked a weird night shift somewhere. Subscribe to hear the rest of my confessions, because after this story, you'll never see a cemetery the same way again. My first week, I did everything right. Kept to the schedule. Logged every patrol in the old notebook I found in the shack. The caretaker only showed up at the start of the night, handed me the gate key and disappeared. I felt like I owned the place. Just me and the headstones. The slow creak of trees swaying. But even on the first night, something felt off. It started with a whisper, so quiet I thought it was wind against the graves. Except the wind doesn't call your name. Hey, I froze. Shone my flashlight around with a shaking hand. Stubbed out my cigarette on the packed dirt and held my breath. Silence. I kept walking, trying to convince myself I was hearing things. But the sound came back, more insistent. Come here. It sounded like a child's voice, low, almost pleading, coming from behind an old mausoleum, cracked, covered in vines. I should have left right then, but curiosity is poison. I crept closer, step by step. The flashlight lit up only the dirty marble. Nothing. The sound stopped. I hurried back to the shack, shaking, slammed the door shut and sat on the wobbly chair with my heart racing. Pulled out my phone to distract myself. No signal, not a single bar. That wasn't normal. Then something scratched the window. Slowly. Long scrapes, like dry fingernails on glass. I didn't want to look. I swear I didn't. But when I turned my head, I saw a silhouette. A face pressed to the window. White as candle wax. No eyes, no mouth. And even without a mouth, I heard the voice, "Don't sleep." In panic, I threw hot coffee at the window. The figure vanished like smoke, but the glass was fogged on the inside, and the fingerprints stayed there, icy. I stayed awake the whole night, clutching my baton like it was a holy sword. The next morning, the caretaker showed up as usual, looked at the fogged glass, looked at me, pale, shaking, and only said, "That's why you can't sleep." After that night, I should have quit. But rent doesn't wait, and the caretaker paid in cash, no questions asked. I went back the next night, armed with a bigger flashlight, a whole thermos of coffee, and a cheap crucifix around my neck. On my second round that night, I noticed the air had changed, colder, a wet chill that crawled up my legs and settled in my bones. The trees didn't move, like they were too afraid to sway. The gate clanged shut behind me without any wind. I started walking faster, swept the flashlight over every grave. The statues seemed to change expressions in the light, mocking me. Then I heard voices, multiple, low, moaning, pleading. In slow, old-fashioned English, "Help us, cold, let us out." The sound came from beneath the ground. My knees buckled. I shone the light down, cracked earth. Some graves were open but empty. The wind finally blew, but it didn't bring relief. It carried the stench of rot. That's when I saw the mist, low, milky, seeping from cracks in the soil. It rose slowly, taking the shape of arms, hands, twisted faces. One of them locked onto me, black pits where eyes should be, mouth open in a silent scream. "Don't sleep," it whispered. I ran, nearly tripped over a fallen headstone. The crucifix bounced against my chest. I grabbed it like my only chance. The voices got louder. They cried. They begged. But there were other voices, deeper, laughing, an ancient, cracked laughter that seemed to come from every tomb. I heard the gate slam shut, chains rattling. I was trapped inside, and then I saw it, standing by the main mausoleum. Tall, dark. It looked like it wore a long coat, but it had no face. Just a black blur where features should be. It didn't move, didn't come closer. Just watched, or felt me. I was shaking so hard I thought I'd faint, but fainting there meant dying, or worse. I knew I'd broken the first rule. I had stopped walking. I'd listened, and now they knew my name. After that night, I wasn't the same, but I went back, of course I did. No one would believe me if I told them, and I needed the money. On the third night, I worked up the nerve to ask the caretaker, "What the hell is in that place?" He just gave me a tired look and said, "Follow the rules, never sleep, never talk to them, never go into the mausoleum." I wanted to laugh, but my throat was too dry. That night the cold was unbearable. The air felt like knives on my skin. The flashlight flickered, batteries draining too fast. The coffee was bitter and lukewarm. I did the first full circuit trying to ignore the whispers, but they were stronger, more insistent. "Come sleep, join us, please." In one corner, I heard something like a child sobbing, weak, interspersed with wet sounds, like something chewing meat. I shone the light and saw an open grave, dirt torn up. Inside, a black hole, bottomless. Something slithered inside, slick and dark. When I jerked the light away, it hissed. I felt something cold brush my ankle. I ran to the shack, but the door was ajar, the window shattered. Inside, the smell hit me, wet, sour, like rotting flesh days old. The last watchman's log was scattered on the floor, scribbled, trembling notes. "They want you to sleep. They only come if you talk to them. "Don't go in the mausoleum." Then I heard 3 slow knocks on the shack door. I stopped breathing. Slow, deliberate. I looked through the broken glass. Faces pressed against it. Dozens. Pale, rotting flesh. Some eyeless. Others grinning with sewn-shut mouths, all speaking in unison. "Come in." I pissed myself without realizing. My legs gave out. I crawled to the wall and stayed there, praying with the crucifix crushed in my fist until my fingers hurt. The voices laughed, screamed, begged, and I knew if I fell asleep even for a second, they'd get in. They'd get inside me. I don't know how I made it to the 4th night. I hadn't slept properly since the first shift. My eyes were black holes. My beard grew in patchy, rough, but I went back. I always went back. The caretaker looked at me and didn't say anything, just handed me the key. The chains on the gate rattled in the cold wind, and the trees seemed to bow to welcome me. That night I knew something had been decided. They weren't just going to whisper anymore. The round started silent, but soon I heard footsteps behind me, heavy, measured, like boots crushing dry leaves. When I stopped to listen, silence. I moved faster. The whispers surrounded me, some begging, some mocking, and then I saw it. The main mausoleum was open. The door once rusted shut, wide like a hungry mouth. A freezing wind poured out of it. On the threshold were footprints, muddy, dried blood. My flashlight shook in my hand. I lit the inside. Walls covered in scratched symbols, candles melted onto skulls, bones stacked, and at the back, a figure waiting. Tall, thin, in a black cloak that moved on its own like living smoke. Where a face should have been was a black hole. 2 red points floated there, locked on me. It raised its arm, and the voices exploded. Screams of agony, hunger, rage. All at once, I felt pressure on my chest, like invisible hands squeezing my lungs. I couldn't breathe. I dropped to my knees. The flashlight rolled away and died with a pop. Darkness swallowed everything. But even without sight, I felt them. They closed in. Cold hands groped me, yanked my hair, tore my shirt. Voices whispered in my ears, in my head. "Sleep, sleep, sleep." I tried to pray, but only air came out. The entity in the mausoleum laughed, a cavernous sound that vibrated in my bones, and I felt my mind give, exhaustion crushing every defense. For a second, I almost gave in, almost closed my eyes forever. But some force, fear, desperation, instinct, made me scream. A raw, broken scream. I got up and ran. I don't remember how I opened the gate or reached my car. I just remember looking back and seeing dozens of pale forms gathered at the cemetery entrance, watching me in silence, waiting. I never went back to that job. Left the uniform crumpled in the car and ran without even quitting properly. The caretaker called me once. I didn't pick up. I spent weeks barely sleeping. Any doze would drag me right back to that mausoleum, to those voices begging me to sleep so they could get in. I started drinking too much, stopped seeing friends, cut myself off from everything, but they didn't leave. Even now, in another town, another state, I hear them. Sometimes in the wind tapping the window, other times in the creaks of this empty house. Sleep. I wake up sweaty, screaming. Always at the same time, 3:15 a.m. I tried explaining it to doctors. They say it's PTSD, insomnia, auditory hallucinations. But no one can explain the finger marks on my neck, like iceberg scars. No one explains the smell of damp earth and rot that appears in my bedroom for no reason. I know the truth. They marked me. They're waiting. And if you're thinking about taking a job like that, think hard. The rule wasn't just for me, never sleep on shift. Because if you sleep, you don't wake up alone. They get in. And if you made it this far, do me a favor. Like this video so this confession is never forgotten. Comment if you've ever seen or heard anything like this. And subscribe so you don't miss the other stories I have to tell. And if you liked this story, click the link below and discover even deeper horrors in our exclusive ebook. Working as a night shift guard in a maximum security prison in the United States isn't for everyone. I took the job because it paid well. 2 little daughters, overdue bills, and no one else wanted the night shift. It was in Starkfield, Louisiana, an old, damp prison that smelled like rust and cheap disinfectant. The hallways were long and echoed too much. Every step turned into thunder on the concrete. The other guards avoided talking about the night shift. They just said, "Do your job. Lock the cells. Don't talk to them. Don't stare too long." I thought it was just veteran talk trying to scare the rookie, but there was something wrong there, something that had nothing to do with gangs or psychopaths. On the first patrol, I felt cold air for no reason. The AC had been broken for years. I heard voices in empty cells, laughter that came from nowhere. I thought about quitting in the first month, but the money kept me there. To this day, I wonder if it was worth it. I'm telling this because I feel like I have no choice. I need to warn you. Maybe you won't believe it, but I carry this every night. Don't go away yet. Stay until the end. Like this video to keep this warning alive. Comment if you've ever worked in a place that felt wrong in a living way. Subscribe to hear other confessions from someone who's seen what shouldn't be seen. Because after this story, you'll never think a prison just locks up criminals. There are things in there with no name, and no one teaches you how to handcuff a ghost. That first week on the job, I felt confident. I'd worked security before. I wasn't the kind to get spooked easily. The supervisor handed me the rules list. Everything seemed normal until the last line. "Never answer if you hear someone call your name." I laughed in his face, thought it was a joke. On my first night, I did my patrol. The fluorescent lights buzzed, flickering, narrow hallways with iron bars that creaked even when locked. Inmates stuffed in bunks, blankets over their heads. But there were empty cells too. Old, rusted, abandoned. In one of them, I heard something, a faint whisper. "Hey!" I shivered all over. It was low, hoarse, almost a moan. I kept walking, trying to ignore it, but again, "Hey, God." The hallway felt like it dropped in temperature. The damp floor reflected the lights like dirty puddles. I looked back. Nothing. Just dark, empty cells. I tried to speed up, but the voice got more desperate. "Please." It sounded like someone crying. Pure panic. I stopped, gripped the baton tight. Heavy breathing, and then I heard my name, clear as day. Whispered right in my ear like someone pressed against me. "James." I spun so fast I smashed my elbow on the bars. Shone my flashlight everywhere. Nothing. No awake inmates. Not a single living soul. But the air smelled like wet mold, and something sour, like rotting meat. My radio on my belt crackled. I grabbed it, shaking, just static. But in the noise, I swear to God, "James." I wanted to quit right then, but I needed the paycheck. So I kept going, fighting the urge to cry. I finally understood why no one wanted the night shift. By the second week, I was barely sleeping. Nightmares every time I closed my eyes, endless hallways, cells opening on their own. I showed up at the prison with deep black circles under my eyes. Coffee didn't help. That night, something changed. The cameras started failing. I watched the monitors between rounds. Screens would go dark with static. When they came back, they showed things they shouldn't. An empty corridor, suddenly a shadow crossing fast. A cell sealed for decades, with someone standing inside, head down, not moving. I called on the radio, no answer. Just damp, muffled static. I decided to check it out. Walked to the old wing. The hallway reeked of rust and piss. My footsteps echoed like someone else was walking with me. When I got to the cell, the monitor showed the door was chained shut, rusted but solid. I aimed my flashlight inside. Empty, filthy. Scribbles on the walls, carved with nails or blades. "Help. Kill me." No sleep. There shouldn't have been wind there, but I felt it. Cold, like something breathing right against my face. Then I heard it, crying, quiet, coming from the floor. I knelt down, shining the light under the door. An eye, a human eye, wide, unblinking, pupil blown, tear dripping. I jerked back so hard I slipped, slammed into the opposite wall. The eye was gone, but the crying kept going. I was shaking so badly I nearly dropped the flashlight. The radio beeped, a familiar voice, but wrong, rougher. "James." I didn't answer. That's when all the lights in the hallway went out at once. In the pitch black, I heard the bars creaking, and dozens of voices started laughing. Deep, dry, like they were laughing inside my skull. I didn't want to go back, but I did. Night shift paid better, and the bills didn't stop. By the third week, I didn't even pretend to be brave. I did my patrols almost jogging, avoided looking into empty cells, tried not to listen too hard, but they wanted to be heard. That night I smelled something burning, like meat in an oven. I checked every block, no fire. The smell got stronger. I went to the oldest corridor, the one no one wanted to patrol. The lights there were weaker. Paint peeled in giant flakes like dead skin. As I walked and I heard breathing, heavy, labored, right behind me. I stopped. Silence. Took 2 more steps. Breathing. Closer. I was shaking so badly the baton slipped in my sweaty hand. James. Low. Right in my ear. I spun around. Nothing. But something shoved me. I slammed into the bars of a cell. On the other side, shapes moved. Eyeless faces. Mouths gaping in silent screams. Skeletal hands clawing through the bars, trying to grab me. They twisted, flowing through the metal like living smoke. I screamed. Tried to run, but the floor was slick with something dark. Blood. Water. I don't know. The stench was foul. Their laughter followed me. Echoed, vibrating in my teeth. My radio screeched. James, come in here. It was the supervisor's voice, but twisted. I looked down the hall. A security door was open, black as a pit. Standing in the doorway was a tall, thin figure in a guard uniform, but no face, just a void where features should have been. It raised its arm, pointed at me. The lights all burst with a series of pops. Darkness swallowed everything, and I felt cold hands close around my throat. I don't really remember how I survived that night. I just remember opening my eyes on the cold floor, my uniform soaked with sweat, and maybe something else. The radio crackled, spitting wet static. The lights flickered, some still buzzing, but the hall was empty. I got up unsteadily. My throat burned like ice-cold claws had squeezed it hard. The corridor seemed longer, darker. The cell doors creaked on their own. Then I heard footsteps. Not mine. Many. I tried to shout, "Who's there?" but the words died in my mouth. The shadows stretched along the walls, and faces emerged from them. Hundreds. Twisted. Eyeless. Mouths open in silent screams. They surrounded me, floating like smoke, but I felt their cold, their weight. Whispers started. Thousands of voices layered on top of each other. Praying, begging, laughing. James. My name came from everywhere. I shut my eyes, tried to tell myself it was a nightmare, but I felt fingers brushing my skin, sinking into my pores. I started praying anything, but they repeated the words, mocking me. Ours. The word echoed in my skull like a hammer. I opened my eyes and saw the figure at the end of the hall. Tall. Wearing the supervisor's uniform, but the face was just a spinning black vortex. It raised its arm, and all the cell doors slammed shut at once. The crash knocked me to the floor. I felt something pierce me, freezing, like my soul was being yanked out. And in that moment I saw they weren't inmates. They were things not locked up by the bars, but by something worse. And I had unlocked it all. I quit the next day. Didn't even wait for my last paycheck. Left my badge in the guard shack and walked away without looking back. The supervisor didn't call me. No one does. The other guards knew. They just didn't talk about it. Even now, years later, I wake up in the middle of the night sweating. I hear the radio crackling in my empty room. Sometimes I swear I feel the weight of the duty belt on my waist, even though I haven't worn it in years. And at 3 a.m., every single time, I hear my name whispered. James. My wife says it's the wind. My friends say it's trauma. But none of them worked there. None of them felt it crawl in and stay because they don't leave with you. They get inside you. And now, sometimes, I see reflections in the mirror. Prison guard uniform, no face, nothing. Just a black hole where eyes should be. They want more. They want you. So if anyone ever offers you a night shift at an old prison, take my advice. Say no, because there's no cell that can hold what lives in there, and no guard that leaves unmarked. If you made it this far, do me a favor. Like this video so this warning is never forgotten. Comment if you've ever lived through something like this or heard similar stories, and subscribe so you don't miss the rest of my confessions. You made it this far. You've heard every confession. 3 stories from people who worked the night shift in places that don't forgive sleep, curiosity, or weakness. A truck driver hunted by something that uses the road as bait. A cemetery watchman who learned that silence is presence. A prison guard who found out you can't handcuff what isn't human. These voices aren't just stories, they're warnings. Because the night shift has rules, and those who break them pay the price. Maybe you think you're safe, that all of this is made up. But the next time you're alone in the dark, stop and listen carefully. Is something there with you, whispering your name, waiting for you to close your eyes? It's better not to find out. Before you leave, do me one dark favor. Like this video to keep this confession alive. Comment what you would do in these situations, and subscribe so you don't miss the next stories I have to tell you. And if you want to dive even deeper into horror, click the link below and discover even darker terrors in our exclusive ebook. Turn off the lights if you dare. But remember, not all darkness is empty.